can I get you a tissue? I hope I won't need to, because today you're going to learn some amazing tips to have part of your allergy toolkit. Allergies are becoming widespread. The rates are increasing. I think everyone and their dog gets seasonal allergies these days. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of strategies on how to, first of all, prevent seasonal allergies naturally, and also how to treat seasonal allergies naturally. This is one of those things that can be addressed really well by natural remedies and just natural herbs and different things that I'm going to talk about today. So thank you so much for joining me. If you are joining me for your first time here on This Week in the Clinic, my name is Josh Gitalis. I'm a clinical nutritionist and functional medicine practitioner, and I own and operate a clinic here in Toronto, Canada, where I work with people one-on-one in person, working through complex health issues, and I also work with people all over the world through Skype and on the phone. I also run a functional nutrition certification program, which is an accumulation of all the courses I teach on all sorts of topics like detoxification and hormones, nutritional supplementation, mental health, and the list goes on. You can check that out at functionalnutrition.ca. But today, we're here to talk all about seasonal allergies and to give you a really awesome toolkit on things that you can have in your toolbox for seasonal allergies that have been shown to be very effective in treating them and preventing them. So I want to thank you all so much for joining me. It's great to see so many people tuning in to learning how to just do, self-care through natural means. Of course, there's the antihistamine. That's the easy solution. We just go to the local drugstore. We go to the local, Shoppers here in Toronto. We have Shoppers Drug Mart, we have Rexall, we have all these different ones. And we can get that antihistamine, but we're not really getting to the root cause, and that's what we want to talk about today. So we're going to talk about, first of all, why there's been such an increase in allergies, not just seasonal allergies, but all allergies over the past 50 years. We're going to cover something called cross-reactivity. So, you'll learn what this word means in a moment. We'll talk about something called the barrel effect. And of course, I'm not going to leave you hanging. We're going to leave you with at least 9 different things that you can try and that you can have in your allergy toolkit that have been shown to be very effective at preventing and treating seasonal allergies. So let's jump right into it. But before I do, for those of you who are joining me at the beginning, I want to give you a little bonus tip. And that bonus tip, that bonus remedy is vitamin D. So a lot of what we're going to be talking today about, a lot of the remedies are somewhat useless, are almost not going to work so well if we don't address a possible vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D regulates the whole immune system. It educates the whole immune system. It's super important for our immunity and for immunotolerance and immunobalance so that we're not overreactive and we're not underreactive. And we've done a whole episode on the importance of vitamin D, and you can check that out in our past episodes on Facebook Live or on the YouTube channel as well. You can check out past episodes, and we did a whole one on vitamin D. So your bonus tip for the day, for those of you who are joining super early, is to make sure your vitamin D blood levels are within the optimal range, and make sure you're supplementing that on a daily basis, and or getting enough sunlight to keep your blood levels within the optimal range. Vitamin D. Okay, so let's look at some of the statistics associated with seasonal allergies. But before I do, I just want to poll you guys that are joining me and find out if you suffer from seasonal allergies. I'm assuming that probably a lot of you do if you're tuning in. But I'd love to know if this is something you have been experiencing. Also, how long you've been experiencing it for. Okay, is it like something new? Did it just start this year? You know, did it just start yesterday with the coming of spring? Or is this something that's been going on for 10, 20, 30 years? Is this something new? So let me know. Put it in the chat box. I'd love to hear what you think. And also, as we go along, if you know someone who could benefit from this, just tag their name or share it on your Facebook page. So first of all, a few statistics. 50 years ago, about 1 in 30 people had allergies. 1 in 30 people. That's 50 years ago. Today, about 1 in 3 people have allergies. And it's quite astounding because, you know, you go to a restaurant or you're amongst friends or, you know, having a dinner and everyone sort of has a different food intolerance and you got to like combine all that information. You need spreadsheets, you need very sophisticated software to figure out what you can actually cook for those meals. And I know restaurants are dealing a lot with allergies. There's many different types of allergies. Today we're talking about seasonal allergies, and seasonal allergies have also increased substantially over the years. And we're going to get into the why behind that, because I always think it's important to understand the why behind something so that we can understand that full picture. So the first, and some of these might be a bit surprising for you. Now, before I actually get into it, again, for those of you who are joining me, put in the chat box what you think some of these reasons are why seasonal allergies have just skyrocketed and why they're such a problem. So the first one is pollution. Pollution. So obviously, there's been a substantial increase in pollution over the past 50 to 100 years. And what we have found is that because of these greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere and the increase of CO2, that can actually increase the pollens coming off of the plants. There was a study done by the University of California, Los Angeles School of Medicine, and what they found was that the combination of diesel and ragweed pollens actually produced a stronger allergic reaction than ragweed pollens alone. So I've spoken about, actually in many of my courses, I speak about this thing called synergy. We see synergy with food, that when you combine different phytonutrients, they have a much stronger beneficial effect. On the flip side, we've seen synergy with chemicals, that when you combine different chemicals, you have a much stronger negative effect than those chemicals alone. I found this study quite interesting because it's taking sort of a natural substance like ragweed and it's taking an unnatural substance like diesel fuel exhaust fumes, seeing what the combination of those are causing, and it's showing that there's even a synergistic effect there. So we also find that these weeds like ragweed that live and grow near places where there's a lot of diesel fuel, for example a highway, actually grow a lot quicker. So there was another study done by the scientists of the US Department of Agriculture, and what they did was they wanted to see how ragweed grew when they were exposed to a lot more pollution. And they used the city of Baltimore as their testing ground because it's very polluted. So they went into the inner part of the city, lots of pollution. They planted some ragweed there, ragweed seeds. Then they went 40 miles away and they planted some ragweed seeds there. And they monitored the growth of these, and what they found was that the ragweed that grew right in the city grew twice as fast and produced way more pollen. Okay? So when we're in a city, we have a lot more exposure to pollen, and when we have pollution, we have those plants actually making way more pollen. So that is in part a little bit of the answer as to why seasonal allergies have increased so rapidly and substantially. We also have longer pollen seasons. With global warming, we have warmer seasons and therefore a longer season for those pollens to grow. Okay, Another factor here is, again, why allergies have skyrocketed is indoor air pollution. So me and my wife actually just launched a course called Healthy at Home. You can find out more information, healthyathome.me. And it's all about having healthy indoor air quality. So we have all these different toxins in our home, volatile organic compounds, heavy metals, off-gassing of carpets and furniture, gas stovetops, and that adds insult to injury in our body and increases or affects our barrel, which I'm going to talk about the barrel effect in a moment if you just stay with me. Unhealthy eating is a huge factor. Obviously, food is the biggest influence on our immune system and how we actually react to different things in our environment. So if we're eating a lot of processed bad foods, then that really messes up the immune system, and the immune system can overreact to pollens and create allergies in the body. Stress is a huge factor, and of course all of us are pretty much overstressed if we're working jobs in the city. Lack of movement, so exercise is a key factor in balancing the immune system. It's a fantastic tuner-upper for our immune system. Exercise, movement. And finally, we have antibiotics, the overuse of antibiotics, which I think we could do a whole other episode on This Week in the Clinic about. But antibiotics basically wipe out our microbiome in our body and really affect how our immune system is balanced. We've got 70% of the immune system in our gut. Many people don't realize that. So if I'm wiping out all of my bacteria with the use of antibiotics, I'm really messing up the communication between my bacteria and my immune cells in my body. So those are some of the reasons. I wouldn't say that those are all of the reasons as to why allergies have skyrocketed. There's many more, but those are some of the key reasons. And we're going to talk about, of course, how to kind of work with that, because some of those we can control, some of those we can't control. We can control some of the stuff that we use in our home, so we want to make a nice, clean home environment, but we can't control pollution in the air. Sort of control where we live, but car drives by it and the ragweed picks that up. We can't really control how much pollen that ragweed's going to create. So all of these different factors fill up our barrel. Okay, so we all have a barrel you can picture inside of you. This barrel that fills up with different stressors, and as we have outdoor air pollution, indoor air pollution, bad diet, not enough movement, overstress, that barrel starts to fill up and fill up and fill up, and then it spills over. And when it spills over, that's typically when we experience symptoms. Wheezing, sneezing, watery eyes, headaches, pressure headaches, sinus pressure. I mean, these are all, the typical symptoms of allergies. So we need to figure out ways to drain that barrel. And by chipping away at all those things that I mentioned as the cause for these allergies, you can actually work to start to drain that barrel and decrease your total load from all these factors, which is really going to help with long-term healing and long-term reversal of allergies. So that's what we call the barrel effect. Now, another thing to consider is something called cross-reactivity. So in our body, when we get exposed to these pollens, our immune system is really kind of doing what it's supposed to. It's looking at the proteins on these pollens and it's saying, hey, that's not Josh. That is something foreign. I have to have an immune response to make sure it doesn't hurt Josh. Right? So it protects Josh, and in doing so, it creates these inflammatory mediators. One of them that I think many allergy sufferers are familiar with is called histamine. These are released by these cells called the mast cells that degranulate and release all these substances, and they cause all those nasty substances. Now, our immune system is smart. It's very smart. But it's not really, really smart, okay? So it's smart enough to, protect us most of the time, but sometimes it gets a little bit confused, right? And just like, doors all kind of look the same-ish, you can kind of tell the difference, but they're all doors. Or lights or chairs, they all kind of fall under the same category. Sometimes pollens and certain foods can actually fall under the same category for the immune system. The immune system looks at those as they come into the body and says, hey, that apple looks a lot like birch pollen. And this is what we call cross-reactivity. So if you're sensitive to certain pollens, you can actually be sensitive to certain foods, and vice versa. If you're sensitive to certain foods, you can be sensitive to certain pollens. It's quite astounding. So I'm going to give you an example, and if you want to get the full list of these, I'm going to make these available on my website for download. So you can go check that out. It's at joshgitalis.com/episode 13. 13 would be in the numerical format. So joshgitalis.com/episode 13. So you can check that out, and you're going to get the full list here. So we've got a full list of cross-reactive foods, and I'm going to give you an example. So if you're allergic to tree pollen, especially birch, you may also react to apples, cherries, figs, kiwi, lychee, nectarine, pears, plums, peach, prunes, persimmons, and strawberries, which are all in the fruit category. You might also react to vegetables like beans, carrots, celery, green peppers, potatoes, tomatoes, parsnips, and peas. And you might also react to a bunch of spices, including anise, basil, dill, caraway, chicory, coriander, cumin, fennel, marjoram, oregano, parsley, paprika, pepper, tarragon, and thyme, and some nuts, hazelnuts, almonds, and walnuts. And if you're sensitive to any of those foods, you might actually react to the birch pollen. This is called cross-reactivity, and it can sometimes get very confusing for people when they are trying to figure out where it's coming from, because the immune system gets a little bit confused. So my recommendation would be, if you know you're sensitive to tree pollen, try to avoid these foods. And if you are sensitive to these foods, that might be a reason why you're reacting to certain pollens. A lot of people don't know this. This is interesting stuff here. So that's a way that we can actually use diet to decrease what's in that barrel and to lessen the allergic response when that season comes. And then, interestingly enough, you can actually bring those foods back when that pollen isn't the predominant pollen in the air, and you probably should not have a reaction. Isn't that nice to know? So you can bring back your apples and cherries and figs and all that good stuff. Okay, so that's the diet, and now we're going to get into my toolkit. We're going to start talking about various remedies related to decreasing allergies, okay? So before that, I just want to check in here to see what kind of comments we have. Morag says, I've had mild seasonal allergies for a long while, but they became more severe in the last 2 years. And that's actually what we're seeing as well, that not only are more people getting these allergies, but they're becoming more severe for people as well. Kelly says, reminds me of the molecular memory process as well. Yes, it definitely has to do with molecular memory, and that's what we're talking about with cross-reactivity. That's exactly what we're talking about, is molecular mimicry. And that's when the immune system can't really tell the difference between foods and pollens. They think they all look the same because the proteins look very similar, the protein sequences. And not getting into the chemistry into too much detail, that's just basically how the immune system works. So we're going to jump into my toolkit. And any and all of these are great. You can try different ones. I'll highlight which ones might be the most powerful, and you can give those a try. So the first ones we're going to talk about, we just spoke a little bit about food. We're going to talk a little bit about tea. Let me just have a sip of one of my first remedies. Delicious. So the first one is not necessarily Oriental, that's just the name of the product. But we've got an oolong tea here. And oolong has a whole bunch of, I'm just going to show you some of this beautiful tea. Look at that. Wonderful. So we've got some beautiful organic oolong here. There's a great company here in Toronto named Tao Tea Leaf. Tao spelled T-A-O. And we love their teas. They're amazing. So oolong has specific components in them called catechins that actually help to decrease the allergic response and help to fortify the immune system. The dosage that some of the research shows in terms of using oolong is about 10 grams per day. That's maybe about 4 tea bags per day. And you want to give it a good brew and drink that up a few times a day. Also, a really interesting thing with not just oolong tea, but also green teas and black teas, is that most of the caffeine is in the first brew. So if you want to get rid of the caffeine and you don't want a caffeine kick, you just want like the good phytonutrients, pour some water on your tea for about 30 seconds, throw out that water, and then rebrew and drink the later tea. So oolong is a great tea for that. Another tea that we have is nettle tea. So nettles are an herb which are called nutritive. So they're not just medicinal, but they also have a lot of nutrients in them, like calcium and some great stuff for the bones and nervous system. But nettle has certain constituents in it, like quercetin, that really help to fortify those mast cells that degranulate and release all the histamine. So there was a study done in Planta Medica in 1990 where they gave nettle to allergy sufferers and then didn't give anything to the control group, and the group with the nettle saw a decrease in symptoms. So we do have a little bit of research showing the benefits of nettle tea. So you're going to want to have that also a few times a day. It's not my favorite tea. It tastes a little earthy. So sometimes what I like to do is actually brew it up and use it as a base in my shake. Some people love the taste of the tea though, so that's up to you. A little taste preference. So we got a couple teas that we talked about, 1 and 2. Now, one remedy that I spoke about earlier, for those of you who joined me at the beginning, our bonus remedy, is like one of the keys for all of these remedies working. So if you didn't see that, you want to go back and check that out near the beginning. It's a critical remedy, and that was our bonus. So we've talked about 2 so far, so a couple teas. The third one, I don't have a sample here today, but this is really interesting that if you eat the honey from the area where you are, that can actually afford you some benefit as well. You get little microdoses of pollen, and you can even have tree pollens as well to help afford you some benefit. It's these microdoses that actually sort of educate the immune system. And there was actually a clinical experiment done in Finland where they did it on people with a birch pollen allergy, and they gave them honey daily from their area from bees that were exposed to the birch pollen, or that were collecting honey from the birch tree, and they gave it to them daily from November till March. And what they found was during the subsequent season, allergy season, is that people had 60% less symptoms, okay, that were doing the honey, 2 times less days than the other group with actual symptoms, and they used 50% less antihistamines. Is that awesome? So just having local honey. We've got an amazing local honey here from Beekeepers Naturals, good friends of mine. They make a fabulous honey, and that's what we use because we like to get the local pollens and the local stuff in the area, right? Because pollen is really powerful food as well. Okay, so a couple teas, honey, and the cool thing is you can actually combine those. You can make some nettle tea with honey, oolong tea with honey, and get your medicine in 1 cup. Love that. That's called therapeutic herbal medicine right there. And now you guys can become experts as we build your toolkit. Okay, the next 2 are actually a couple of my favorites and probably the most powerful for acute antihistamine relief. So the first few were more like long-term, building your immunity. These are more for acute. So we've got something called quercetin here. Quercetin is a phytonutrient that we find in certain plant foods. We find it in apples, we find it in onions, and it is a powerful antihistamine, natural antihistamine. So what it does, one of the ways it works, is that mast cell that degranulates and releases all of its histamine, it helps to stabilize the cell membrane of that cell. So quercetin is a great one. What I always recommend is that people increase the dosage until their symptoms improve. It may take 1 or 2 days because it takes a little bit of time for it to build up in your bloodstream, but this is probably one of the most powerful antihistamines in the natural healing world. Quercetin. There's also something that's a little bit more bioavailable called enzymatically modified isoquercetrin. That's why you see EMIC here. It's also very effective. They're both effective. Straight up quercetin you have to use a little bit more of. EMIC absorbs a little bit better. You have to use a little bit less of it. The price point on both are about the same, so it doesn't really matter hugely which one you choose. Working together with the EMIC or the quercetin is vitamin C. Vitamin C is also a natural antihistamine, and some people need really, really high dosages, 20, 30 grams in the allergy season to help get that antihistamine effect, and quercetin and vitamin C work really well together. Okay, moving on to the next one, which I don't have a sample here for you today, but actually there's a little bit of one of the ingredients in our quercetin, or some of the quercetins we use. But anyway, the next one is called N-acetylcysteine, or NAC, and bromelain. And these two nutrients are what are called mucolytics. So they make the mucus in our mucous membranes in our nose and in our lungs a lot less sticky, and that way the pollens don't hold on as much. So N-acetylcysteine and bromelain are also really effective. Now, thinking a little bit long term, so we talked about some teas and using the honey more as like a build up into the season and through the season. We just spoke about a couple acute remedies which are very powerful. And then we want to also think about long-term immunity. So my bonus remedy right at the beginning is a really important one for long-term immunity. You can go check that out if you missed that. But these last two are not necessarily powerful for acute allergies, but they're very, very powerful and effective for long-term allergy treatment and really to balance the whole immune system. So the first one is a probiotic. Really any probiotic, so there's a lot of great research on all types of different strains. Lactobacillus and bifidobacterium are some of the ones with the most research. But a probiotic is really going to help fortify the immune system. I spoke about earlier how about 70% of our immune system is in our gut. And a lot of that is related to what's communicating with that immune system, and that's the bacteria in our gut. So a probiotic, and that's something you can do long term. The other one that I really love, and I recommend quite often, and I take it myself almost every day, are medicinal mushrooms. So my good friends at Four Sigmatic make an amazing 5-mushroom blend with chaga, reishi, shiitake, maitake, and turkey tail. And the way medicinal mushrooms work is that they educate the immune system. So if it's overactive, which is what we see with allergies, it helps to calm it down. And when it's underactive, when it's, people are getting infections and colds a lot, it helps to boost it up. And medicinal mushrooms are amazing for that. So that's something long-term. It's one of the superfoods I recommend often people take nonstop because it's so good. You could always take an herbal break, 1 week here, 1 week there. And medicinal mushrooms are super powerful. Just to highlight their power, they're used a lot even in natural cancer treatment. So I use this a lot with clients that might have a really depressed immune system and need a lot of support. So that's something more long-term. And then finally, my last remedy, and for your benefit, I didn't bring it in today to do a demo for you, but a neti pot. Some of you may have heard of this, some of you may have not. This comes from Ayurvedic medicine. It's a little pot, looks like almost like a genie pot. You fill it with a saline solution, a little bit of sea salt, some water, mix it up, pour it through the nose, cleans out the whole nasal cavity, and decreases the adhesion of these different pollens on the nasal cavity. Neti pots are awesome. I recommend you use them at least twice a day in allergy season. And they can also provide some really great relief when you have a clogged up or a plugged up nasal cavity. So it really helps to kind of keep things clean, helps to give you a little bit of relief, helps you even sleep at night, which is so important for immunity as well. So that's my toolkit. We spoke about a lot of things, some stuff for acute, some stuff for long term. We spoke about why so many people are getting allergies. I gave you one bonus, super important remedy near the beginning that you guys can go check out. The recording is available 24/7 afterwards. We also spoke about cross-reactivities. If you want the full list of cross-reactive foods, you're going to go to joshgitalis.com/episode 13. And we're going to provide a free download for you there so you can get a full list of the foods you might want to avoid during the different seasons based on your allergies. So I'm just going to check in here one more time to see what kind of comments have come in. One comes from Ann Welsh. Hey Ann, always good to see you. How much honey and does it have to be raw? So I always recommend raw honey because it has all those fantastic enzymes. And in terms of the amount of honey that they used, I'd actually have to go back to that study that I was talking about from Finland to see how much. But from what I know, I would say about a teaspoon, because we're talking about microdoses. We're talking about, there's this effect that we have on the immune system where sometimes if we use a very small amount of an item, it can afford us some immunity against that item when it's in larger dosages. They've actually done studies where they've cured people of peanut allergies using very small controlled doses and increasing that dose over time. That, of course, was in a very controlled environment, not something I would recommend you try at home, but it has been done, and we do have some science on that. There's also something called sublingual immunotherapy, where they use some of these things under the tongue as well. Okay, and a question from Sheila Herbalista, I love the name. Why not Amla or Camu Camu for vitamin C? I love Amla and Camu Camu for vitamin C. They're great whole food forms of vitamin C. If we're getting into therapeutic levels of what the body needs in times of certain stress, or if we're treating a certain condition, you're never going to reach therapeutic levels of vitamin C by consuming whole food forms. So as a maintenance, I love it. As a food, maybe a superfood to include in your diet, I love it. But if we're getting into therapeutic dosages, we need to actually use a form of vitamin C like ascorbic acid to really get into those huge doses, sometimes 20, 30, 40 grams. There's a study published, I don't have the reference handy at the moment, but we talk about it in our therapeutic nutrition and supplements and practice course, and I've spoken about it before, where they have looked to see how much vitamin C someone will actually absorb in different situations. This is called bowel tolerance, and the more our body needs, the more it will absorb. And they actually found that people will absorb up to 150 to 200 grams of vitamin C throughout a 24-hour period. So they were giving people with like mononucleosis, like 10, 20, 30 grams every 30 minutes or an hour, right? Because we can only absorb so much at one time. So the potential to absorb huge amounts of vitamin C is there, but we need a really good potent source of it, and unfortunately whole foods don't offer that. That is the number one choice when we're supplementing, but of course we have to go to some of the synthetics if need be. Thank you all so much for joining me for this week in the clinic. This week we spoke all about seasonal allergies. I hope this has given you a powerful toolkit that you can use. Use some of the recommendations. I appreciate all your participation. If you enjoyed this, give me a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. I'll be answering questions for about 48 hours, so you can put that in the comment box. Of course, all of these videos are available to check out the replay 24/7. You wake up at 4 in the morning, can't get back to sleep. Why not listen to Josh talk about allergies? You know, it's something I think more and more people are taking up. But of course, put your phone on the dark mode. We'll talk about that another time. So you can watch these anytime through Facebook Live. I'm also posting them on YouTube as well, so you can check out all the replays there as well. If you haven't, sign up for my newsletter at joshgitalis.com. That's where you'll get all the updates and also a whole bunch of information on functional nutrition and functional medicine. And that's where you'll be kept up to date. Remember, all this knowledge, all this great information is useless unless you apply it. So I always say applied knowledge is power. And you got to just do it. Go out, get some of the teas, get some of the remedies, try them for yourself. And I always say the best way to get started is to get started. Thank you all so much for joining me, and have a fabulous day. And hopefully you won't need the good old tissue this season around. Take care. Bye.